Have you ever felt stuck, like something is holding you back, but you can't quite put your finger on what it is? You've got the talent, you've got the ideas, you've even got the ambition. But for some reason, when it's time to take the leap, to make the move, to raise your hand or speak your truth, you hesitate, you stop, you shrink, and then you wonder, what is wrong with me? Here's the truth. There is probably nothing wrong with you, but there may be something blocking you, something you can't see, but you can definitely feel. It's not always a person, a place, or a situation. Sometimes the biggest block standing between where you are and where you want to be isn't physical at all. It's invisible. It lives in your thoughts, your patterns, your self-talk, and the beliefs you've carried with you for years, some of which you may not even know you have. These invisible walls are powerful, and because you can't see them, you often don't question them. You just adapt to them. You learn to navigate around them, not realizing that the path you're on is limited by these unseen barriers. It's like living in a room where someone told you the walls were made of concrete, so you never bothered to push. But what if the wall was just a curtain? What if all it took was the courage to reach forward and discover that the boundary wasn't real? Most of us grow up learning rules, what's allowed, what's appropriate, what's possible, and many of those lessons are useful. But some are inherited limitations passed down through family, culture, or experience. Maybe someone once told you that you weren't leadership material. Maybe someone laughed at your dream and that embarrassment got stored deep in your subconscious. Maybe your fear of failure started when you were a kid and you disappointed someone you loved. Over time, these moments turn into internal narratives. You stop trying not because you can't, but because you believe you can't, or worse, you believe you shouldn't. One of the most common invisible walls is self-doubt. It's that quiet, persistent voice in your head that whispers, "You're not good enough," or "What if they laugh at you?" It doesn't yell, it doesn't scream. It speaks in subtle tones like hesitation, procrastination, or overthinking. And the scariest part is that sometimes self-doubt disguises itself as logic. It tells you you're just being careful or waiting for the right time, when in reality, you're just stuck in a loop of fear, pretending to be planning. Another invisible block is the fear of judgment. Humans are social creatures. We care what others think. But when that concern turns into paralysis, when it keeps you from showing up authentically or sharing your ideas, it becomes a wall. Think about how many moments of brilliance never saw the light of day because someone was afraid of what others might say. How many people chose silence over truth, safety over growth, and comfort over change, not because they didn't want to grow, but because they feared the cost of being seen. Sometimes the block is perfectionism. The belief that everything must be flawless before it's worthy, that you can't speak until the speech is perfect. You can't launch until the product is polished. You can't begin until every step is mapped out. And so you wait. You wait for a perfect moment that never comes. Perfectionism at its core is not about high standards. It's about fear. Fear of criticism, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. And so you build walls of not yet and not ready without realizing you're locking yourself inside a prison of your own creation. There's also the block of comparison. In a world dominated by social media, it's easy to believe that everyone else is doing better than you. You see their wins, their highlight reels, their carefully curated lives, and you start to feel small. You question your own pace, your own journey, your own worth. And that questioning becomes a wall. Instead of focusing on your path, you start chasing someone else's. Instead of believing in your unique voice, you try to copy theirs. And in doing so, you lose the very thing that makes you powerful, your authenticity. What makes these invisible walls so dangerous is that they operate silently. They don't announce themselves. They don't tell you, "Hey, I'm here to block you." Instead, they show up as anxiety, as exhaustion, as creative burnout, as cycles of almost starting but never finishing, as endless planning with no execution, as relationships that stay on the surface because vulnerability feels too risky. These blocks are subtle, but they are potent. So how do you begin to break them down? The first step is awareness. You can't fight what you won't face. Take time to sit with yourself, honestly, without judgment, and ask, where am I stuck and why? Listen closely to your first instincts. Don't overthink. Just observe. Sometimes the simple act of naming the block, whether it's fear, doubt, perfectionism, or past trauma, is enough to loosen its grip. The second step is self-inquiry. Start challenging your internal narrative. Who told you that you couldn't do it? Who told you that your dream was too big, too risky, too unrealistic? Was it your voice or someone else's? Often, we internalize criticism from others and start repeating it to ourselves. We take temporary setbacks and turn them into permanent identities. But you are not your past. You are not your fears. You are not your failures. You are the awareness behind those experiences, and that awareness has the power to change everything. Third, you must practice compassionate action. That means taking small, courageous steps forward, even if you're scared, even if you're unsure, even if your voice shakes. You don't have to bulldoze the wall all at once. You just need to test it, lean against it, see if it gives. And often, you'll find it's not a wall at all. It's a story, a belief, a wound. And stories can be rewritten. Beliefs can be reprogrammed. Wounds can be healed. It's also important to surround yourself with truth tellers. People who see your light, even when you forget it. People who challenge your limits, not to hurt you, but to free you. The right community can hold up a mirror and say, "This block you're facing, it's not real. You've got more in you than you think." Sometimes we need others to help us see what we've been blind to for too long. And finally, you must be willing to let go. Let go of the identity you built around being stuck. Let go of the excuses that kept you comfortable. Let go of the illusion that safety lies in standing still. Progress is messy. Growth is uncomfortable. But every step forward is a declaration. I see the wall, and I'm not afraid of it anymore. The real challenge is not finding the path forward. The real challenge is removing what's in the way, the invisible blocks that have kept you from walking it. And those blocks, they lose their power the moment you recognize they're there. Let me know if you'd like the other keynotes expanded as well, or if you need this in a formatted document. Fear is one of the most natural and primal human emotions. It's designed to protect us, to keep us alive, to warn us when danger is near. But the fear we experience today is rarely about life or death situations. It's no longer about being chased by wild animals or finding shelter from storms. Instead, it's fear of fate, allure, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, and fear of the unknown. These are modern fears, internal ones, and they're just as powerful. What makes them especially dangerous is that they often don't feel like fear at all. They disguise themselves. They speak in rational tones. They wear the mask of logic. This is where fear becomes tricky. It doesn't always shout, "Don't do this, I'm scared." Instead, it whispers things that sound intelligent, responsible, even wise. Let's wait until the timing is better. You need more experience before trying that. What if it doesn't work? Shouldn't you have a backup plan first? These thoughts seem reasonable. They feel like smart decisions. But more often than not, they're fear dressed up as practicality. Fear rarely comes to you directly. It almost never says, "I'm afraid you'll fail." What it says instead is, "Let's be realistic." And suddenly, you start confusing fear with maturity, hesitation with strategy, and paralysis with preparation. You start believing that taking no action is the most responsible action. And slowly, the dream begins to die, not because you didn't have the talent or the passion, but because you listened to fear, pretending to be your voice of reason. Think about all the opportunities you've let pass by, not because you weren't capable, but because your fear made a compelling argument. Maybe it told you that the market was too crowded, or that it wasn't the right season to launch your idea. Maybe it said you weren't ready to speak up, that someone else more qualified should take the lead. Maybe it told you to keep your head down and avoid attention, because standing out would make you a target. These thoughts don't feel like fear, they feel like strategy. That's the trap. Fear doesn't need to shout to control you, it only needs to sound convincing. One of the most subtle disguises fear wears is over-planning. You convince yourself to it. You need just a little more time, a little more research, a little more tweaking before you start. But the truth is, you've already done enough. You already know enough to take the next step. You're not stuck because you're underprepared. You're stuck because fear is using planning as a delay tactic. You're trying to map out the whole journey before you take the first step. And while that feels logical, it's actually fear saying, let's stall a little longer, just in case. Another form fear takes is perfectionism. The voice that tells you your work isn't good enough yet, that it needs to be flawless before it's seen. That sounds like high standards, right? It sounds like quality control. But look closer. Is the goal really to improve, or is it to delay? Is it to refine, or is it to avoid being vulnerable? Because once you put your work out there, people can judge it. Once you speak up, you can be heard and criticized. So fear says, keep polishing. But the truth is, the fear isn't about the work, it's about being seen. Fear also poses as protectiveness. It says, don't get your hopes up. It tells you to lower your expectations so you won't be disappointed. On the surface, that sounds reasonable. No one wants to feel let down. But what fear is really saying is, if you don't hope, you won't hurt. So you start playing small, calling it humility. You stop dreaming big, calling it realism. But deep down, you know you're settling. Not because you want less, but because fear is convincing you it's safer. Sometimes fear takes the form of external blame. You start thinking, I'd move forward if I had more money. Or, I'd pursue this if the economy was better. While circumstances can absolutely play a role, often fear amplifies these conditions to justify inaction. Instead of admitting, I'm afraid, we say, it's not the right time. We externalize the reason to protect you, our ego, because if it's the world's fault, then we're off the hook. We don't have to take responsibility. We don't have to risk anything. Here's the thing. Logic isn't always the enemy. Rational thinking is essential. Strategic thinking is valuable. But there's a difference between thoughtful planning and fear-based stalling. There's a difference between preparing and hiding. Logic guides us forward when it's based on clarity. Fear disguised as logic holds us back under the illusion of safety. So how do you tell the difference? The key is emotional honesty. When you hear that voice of reason in your head, ask yourself, is this really strategy, or is it fear in disguise? Does this thought move me forward or keep me stuck? Is this hesitation based on facts or on imagined outcomes that haven't even happened? You also need to check your emotional state. True logic is calm and confident. Fear disguised as logic feels tight, anxious, hesitant. It creates stories of what could go wrong. It magnifies risk and minimizes your ability to handle it. When your logic makes you feel smaller, more uncertain, or less powerful, it's not logic. It's fear wearing a mask. Another test is to look at your patterns. Do you keep repeating the same excuse in different situations? For example, do you always say, it's not the right time, no matter the opportunity? That's a pattern worth examining. Repeating logic can be a sign that you're not actually analyzing. You're rationalizing. You're looking for a reason to justify not acting rather than making a decision based on the truth of the moment. You also need to tune into regret. Regret is a powerful teacher. If you frequently look back and say, I wish I'd gone for it, then chances are fear was in charge. If you're constantly feeling like you missed out, that's not logic at play. That's fear convincing you to play safe and costing you growth in the process. So what do you do when you realize fear is masquerading as logic? You confront it with courage and clarity. You name it. You say, this isn't my wisdom talking, it's my fear. And the moment you name it, you weaken it. Fear thrives in ambiguity. It loses power when it's exposed. Once you recognize the disguise, you can decide whether to listen or challenge it. Next, you take intentional action. You don't have to do something reckless, but you do need to move. Action creates momentum, and momentum weakens fear. Even a small step forward, making the call, writing the email, saying the words, can shift you from paralysis to possibility. Because once you move, you prove to yourself that fear doesn't have to be the decision maker. You also need to surround yourself with bold energy. People who push past fear, people who question the status quo, people who don't wait for perfect conditions, they create them. Being around courageous thinkers rewires your mindset. Their boldness reminds you of what's possible beyond your current comfort zone. It shows you that fear is normal, but it doesn't have to be the boss. And most of all, you need to trust yourself. Fear often sounds logical because it feeds off your self-doubt. It exploits the parts of you that feel unworthy or unprepared. But here's the truth. You've survived every challenge so far. You've handled things you once thought would break you. That same strength still lives in you. And when fear tries to sound like logic, you can remind yourself, I know the difference, and I'm choosing growth, not safety. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to stop letting fear pretend it's wisdom, because the moment you recognize the mask, you're no longer being controlled. You're in control. The comfort zone is a seductive place. It's warm, familiar, predictable. Nothing surprises you there. Nothing challenges you. It's the zone of safety where routines are known, risks are minimal, and outcomes are mostly guaranteed. On the surface, it feels like peace. But look a little deeper and you'll find something else lurking beneath that stillness, stagnation. Because comfort, while calming in the short term, can become a cage in the long term. And if you stay there too long, it slowly begins to rob you of your potential. We all have a comfort zone. It's made up of our habits, routines, relationships, and identities. It's shaped by past experiences, both positive and negative, and reinforced by the stories we tell ourselves about what we're capable of. The comfort zone isn't always physical. Often it's emotional. It's the conversations we avoid, the chances we don't take, the ideas we never pursue because they stretch us too far. And over time, what started as a safe space becomes a prison built out of fear and familiarity. The most dangerous thing about the comfort zone is that it doesn't feel dangerous. That's what makes it so deceptive. You're not actively in pain. You're not failing. You're not struggling. In fact, life might look pretty good from the outside. But deep down, something feels off. You start to feel uninspired, unfulfilled. You lose your curiosity. Your energy dips. You wonder why you're restless even though everything seems fine. That's the quiet voice of your potential knocking, asking for more. Growth never happens in comfort. It happens in the stretch, in the challenge, in the discomfort of trying something new and not being good at it yet. Every time you step outside your comfort zone, you meet a version of yourself you haven't met before, a braver version, a more capable version. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's scary. But that fear, that uncertainty, that's the sign you're moving towards something meaningful. Many people avoid growth not because they don't want it, but because they fear what they'll lose if they leave their comfort zone. They fear judgment. They fear failure. They fear losing relationships that were built on the their smaller version of themselves. And so they stay, not because they're happy, but because they're afraid of becoming unfamiliar, even to themselves. There's a cost to staying safe. Every opportunity you don't take, every skill you don't develop, every connection you don't make because you were afraid to speak up. Over time, those missed moments accumulate, not as a single regret, but as a life that feels smaller than it could have been. And it's not that you were incapable, it's just that the cage of comfort was too convincing. Think about all the most meaningful moments in your life. Chances are they didn't happen when you were comfortable. They happened when you were stretched, when you were nervous, when you weren't sure how it would turn out, but you did it anyway. Maybe it was starting a new job, moving to a new place, speaking in front of people for the first time, saying yes when everything in you wanted to say no. That's when transformation happens. The comfort zone operates like a thermostat. The moment things start to get too hot, too intense, too challenging, too uncertain, you feel the urge to cool things down, to return to familiar patterns, to seek emotional safety. And that's human. That's biology. But if you want a different life, if you want growth, expansion, and purpose, you have to override that urge. You have to be willing to feel the heat. One of the biggest myths people believe is that they need to feel ready before they take action, that someday they'll wake up with total confidence, clarity, and certainty, and then they'll make the move. But that day rarely comes. Confidence doesn't precede action, it follows it. You become ready by doing. You build strength by stepping forward, not by standing still. Action creates readiness, not the other way around. There's also a belief that staying in the comfort zone keeps you safe from failure. But in truth, it only protects you from short-term discomfort. It doesn't protect you from long-term regret. Playing it safe might keep you from failing publicly, but it also keeps you from succeeding meaningfully. The people you admire, the ones who inspire you, didn't get where they are by staying comfortable. They got there by doing what most people won't, risking discomfort in exchange for purpose. It's important to recognize the difference between comfort and alignment. Alignment means you're in sync with your values, your purpose, your inner truth. Comfort, on the other hand, means you're not being stretched. Sometimes we mistake resistance as misalignment, but often it's just discomfort calling us to grow. Not all resistance means stop. Sometimes it means this is the edge of your old self. Keep going. So how do you begin to expand your comfort zone? You start with small acts of courage. You don't have to leap into the unknown. You just have to step into it. Say what you really mean in a conversation. Try something new before you're ready. Show up before you feel qualified. These small acts build trust in yourself. They remind you that discomfort won't destroy you. It will shape you. Next, you practice consistency over intensity. Growth doesn't come from a single bold moment. It comes from the daily decision to stretch yourself just a little, to ask the hard question, to raise your hand, to stay with the task 1 minute longer than you want to. Over time, these small challenges compound, and before you know it, what used to scare you becomes your new normal. It's also important to reframe failure. Instead of seeing it as a threat, see it as a teacher. Every failure holds data. Every misstep reveals a blind spot. When you're willing to fail, you become a student of your own evolution. And students grow, they learn, they move forward. The people who fear failure the most are the ones who've stopped learning. The ones who embrace it are the ones who transform. You also need to be intentional about your environment. The people you surround yourself with can either keep you stuck or help you grow. Spend time with those who challenge your thinking, who call out your potential, who model courage in their own lives. Being around people who are growing will normalize growth for you. It will stretch what you believe is possible. And finally, you must be willing to let go of old identities. Comfort zones are often built around who you used to be. Maybe you were always the quiet one, or the helper, or the reliable one who never made waves. But if those identities are keeping you small, it's time to let them go. You are not a fixed character in a story. You're the author. You get to rewrite the script. Breaking out of your comfort zone isn't a one-time act. It's a way of living. It's a mindset. It's the belief that who you could become is worth more than what you currently know. And that belief, that's where freedom lives. There is a moment in every person's life when they wait. They wait for a sign, an invitation, a green light, a nudge from the world that says, you're allowed now. You're ready. You've earned this. We wait for approval, for recognition, for someone to say, yes, you can go for it. But here's the truth that many people never realize until years have passed them by. That permission, it was never theirs to give. It was always yours. From the time we are young, we're taught to ask for permission. Permission to speak, to sit, to leave, to explore, to be ourselves. And in the early years, that structure makes sense. It teaches order, safety, responsibility. But over time, that pattern conditions us to believe that someone else must always authorize our choices. And so, as adults, we carry that programming forward, hesitant to act unless someone tells us we can. You may not even realize you're doing it. It shows up subtly. You have a bold idea, but before acting on it, you wait to see if someone else thinks it's good. You want to start a new chapter in your life, but you wait for someone's blessing. You know you're capable of more, but you keep quiet, waiting for the world to discover you and lift you up. But here's what often happens instead. No one comes, not because you're not worthy, but because people are too focused on their own lives to validate yours. And so your talents stay hidden, your voice stays quiet, your dreams stay shelved, not because you weren't ready, but because you were waiting for permission that was never going to arrive. This is where the shift must happen. You have to stop outsourcing your power. You have to stop waiting for someone to crown you as capable, smart, talented, or worthy. You must realize you are the permission. You are the authority. You are the one who decides when it's time. Every time you hesitate to act because someone might not approve, you give away a piece of your freedom. Every time you delay speaking up because someone might not like it, you trade your truth for comfort. And every time you dim your light to fit in, you reinforce the lie that your brightness needs validation. It doesn't. There's a voice inside of you that already knows the next step. It whispers, it tugs, it nudges you forward. But over the years, you may have learned to silence it. You've been told to play it safe, to be humble, to not stand out too much. You've learned to doubt yourself in the name of being realistic. And now, even when opportunity is in front of you, you question if you're allowed to take it. But let's be real. What are you waiting for exactly? For someone to tell you you're good enough, for the perfect moment, for everyone around you to approve? That day won't come, even if you touch it or get external permission. It will never feel like enough if you haven't claimed it for yourself. Because true permission isn't about someone else giving you a yes. It's about you deciding that your voice matters, that your ideas matter, that your life is yours to shape without apology. One of the biggest lies people believe is that they need credentials to matter. They think, when I get the title, then I'll speak. When I have the degree, then I'll start. When someone important recognizes me, then I'll own my worth. But credentials are not the source of value. They are sometimes the result of someone who already knew their value and chose to step forward. Permission starts when you stop needing external validation to act on internal truth. When you stop asking, do they think I can? And start declaring, I know I can. It begins the moment you choose to trust your inner knowing more than other people's opinions. But this is not about arrogance. It's about agency. It's about owning your right to take up space, to try, to fail, to get back up again. Not because someone said you could, but because you chose to. The most powerful people you see in the world didn't wait to be chosen. They chose themselves. Think about the people you admire, the authors, the creators, the leaders. Do you think someone handed them a certificate of readiness before they began? No. They began when they were unsure, when they were scared, when they had no guarantees. But they moved anyway. That's what gave them momentum. And the more they moved, the more permission they gave themselves. There's a powerful thing that happens when you claim your own permission. You begin to inspire others to do the same. Your courage gives others courage. Your self-trust opens the door for someone else to stop doubting themselves. You create a ripple effect, but that ripple can't start until you drop the need to be chosen and choose yourself instead. So what does giving yourself permission look like? It looks like raising your hand in a room where you feel intimidated because your perspective mattered. It looks like taking a shot, knowing you might fail, but choosing to try anyway because you said yes. You'll never feel ready, not fully. The fear won't disappear. It will whisper, who do you think you are? And in that moment you must answer, I'm the one who gives myself permission to try. This isn't about waiting for confidence to show up. It's about showing up without it and letting it catch up to you. And guess what?